The news. President Biden will head to Monterey Park, California today, where he is expected to call for tougher gun safety measures. According to the White House, the president will announce an executive order meant to reduce gun violence and increase background checks. The city of Monterey Park suffered a mass shooting back in January when a gunman opened fire inside a dance studio during a Lunar New Year celebration, killing 11 people. Joining us now, ahead of the president's visit, White House Domestic Policy Advisor and Director of the Domestic Policy Council, Susan Rice. She also served as National Security Advisor in the Obama administration. And Susan, of course, this is something that Joe Biden was charged with after Sandy Hook. He tried to get some kind of congressional action on gun control measures. Is there optimism in the White House that any efforts that you could take by executive order could have the kind of impact that America needs to try to stem this epidemic of mass shootings that we've seen so far this year?
Well, good morning, Katie. It's great to be with you. Obviously, the most important thing that could happen to stem gun violence in this country would be for Congress finally to pass long overdue legislation to make background checks universal, to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, to hold the gun industry accountable and take away its unique immunity from liability, and many other legislative steps. Last year, President Biden was proud to sign the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the most important piece of gun legislation in 30 years. It did some important things, but there is no substitute for what Congress must do. But in the meantime, President Biden, from his first day in office, has sought to use every executive authority that he possibly has to make our country safer. And what he will sign today is a landmark executive order that will bring the United States government as close as we possibly can be without legislation to universal background checks. And that will be an important step forward. The executive order will also encourage and mandate greater efforts to utilize red flag laws in those 19 states in the District of Columbia which have them, to keep guns out of the hands of those who might be a danger to themselves or to others. And safe storage of weapons, another critical ingredient of trying to keep guns out of the hands of those who should not have them. This executive order will do a number of things. It's quite comprehensive, and it will continue to place President Biden in the position of being the president who's taken more executive action on guns than any other president at this point in his tenure.
Susan, thank you so much for being with us. You know, all these things that he's doing, he's going to be painted as some left-wing radical freak, and yet the overwhelming majority of NRA owners, the overwhelming majority of Republicans, the overwhelming majority of Americans all support this legislation. And yet you have Ron DeSantis in Florida, and I don't want to make this personal to any one person, but just to show you how extreme people are on this issue, actually talking about open carry in the state of Florida. Can you talk about the radicalism of one side versus the very mainstream, common sense, popular approach that this White House is taking on guns?
Well, Joe, that's exactly the point. If you look at any polling, it all shows that the vast majority of Americans support universal background checks. It's just common sense to keep dangerous weapons out of the hands of criminals, domestic violence abusers. That's just common sense, whether you're a recreational shooter or a collector of guns. You want, if you're rational and responsible, for that to be the case. Assault weapons ban, that too is broadly popular. And so what you're seeing is a vast disconnect between the torqued and extreme politics of some here in Washington that bear no resemblance to the priorities and the values of the vast majority of the American people. And when you're talking about, you know, open carry and members of a party, you know, using an assault weapon as a symbol of their party, it's just really out of touch with the fact that gun violence is the leading killer of young people in this country. If you are a black and brown young person or living in many of our communities, you're very, very vulnerable to gun violence. We see it all day, every day, not just in the mass shootings that make the headlines lines all over the country, in urban areas, rural areas, and everywhere in between. But every day in our communities, in Main Street, street corners, and everywhere else, it's horrific. And we have got to do something about it. President Biden has been clear, enough is enough. It's past time to reinstate an assault weapons ban, a ban on high-capacity magazines, and many other critical steps that require legislation. But in the meantime, Joe, he is going to do everything that he can as president to make this country safer.
Director Rice, good morning. Jonathan Lemire. Switching gears, just a few days ago, the president unveiled his budget, and while doing so, said he would meet with Speaker McCarthy tomorrow if the Speaker was willing and had his own budget presentation. So my two questions to you are, one, have you heard from the Speaker? And secondly, what is your level of concern about the looming debt ceiling fight?
Well, I mean, Jonathan, everybody understands that it would be the absolute height of irresponsibility for the United States to renege on the commitments that it has made in the past. This is not about what we might do in the future and spending going forward. This is about the full faith and credit of the United States of America. We have never, ever compromised on that. If we were to do so, it would be catastrophic. Those who are threatening it are deeply irresponsible. And what we need to do now is do what we have done every time in the past of our history, which is to meet our obligations by raising the debt ceiling. 25% of the debt that we're talking about was incurred during the prior administration, and we have historically raised the debt ceiling on a bipartisan basis. That's what should happen now. It's absolutely critical.
And speaking of critical, you have played a critical role not only in America's domestic policy debates over the past few years, but also in U.S. foreign policy. You were, of course, ambassador to the United Nations. And also, at least in this family, you serve in the most important position as National Security Advisor. At least that's what Mika's dad would say. So I feel like it's okay to ask you this question. We've been very concerned this morning about a guy who's considered a favorite for the nomination of the Republican Party, Ron DeSantis, who parroted Vladimir Putin's and the Kremlin's talking points yesterday, talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine being a, quote, border dispute. Would you mind just talking about how dangerous a signal that sends not only to Vladimir Putin, but also to our allies across Europe and the world?
Well, Joe, you're making me feel old by taking me through my resume, but I am really here to talk about domestic policy, despite my long history in national security. Let me just say very briefly that America needs leadership who understands what is at stake in our world. When Russia blatantly invades and occupies a neighboring sovereign country and conducts a completely unnecessary war with extraordinary brutality that threatens the integrity of the international system, NATO, and all of the principles of how we operate on the world stage, we have to stand strong. We have to be united, and we have to see it for the threat that it is to the entire international system and, of course, to our national security.
White House domestic policy advisor on a very beautiful morning at the White House, Susan Rice. Thank you very much for joining us today.